White cop lies about black woman in court. Not knowing she's a high-ranking Navy SEAL, he panics. Have you ever witnessed a moment so explosive, so shocking, that it changed your entire perspective on justice? Welcome to the unbelievable story of a high-ranking Navy SEAL, a wronged black woman fighting for her dignity against a system meant to protect her, and a cop so blinded by prejudice he never saw the storm heading his way. In this saga of law, honor, and secret identities, one false testimony in court ignites a firestorm of revelations. Betrayals, alliances, and dramatic twists await, culminating in ultimate karmic payback. Brace yourself for a tale that will leave you forever questioning everything. Tiana West had always carried herself with quiet confidence. Growing up in a small Virginia town near the naval station Norfolk, she learned early on that life was rarely fair, but that one must stand tall and fight for what was right. She had seen it all in her 3 decades of life, prejudice, ignorance, and the heavy weight of expectations that fell on her shoulders. The moment she decided, at the age of 17, that she would do something truly extraordinary, become a Navy SEAL, everyone told her it was impossible. A black woman passing the notoriously grueling basic underwater demolition SEAL Bud S training? Unheard of. But Tiana possessed an unwavering dedication to push boundaries and defy the odds. When she first set foot on the naval base Coronado in San Diego for Bud S, Tiana felt an electric mixture of pride and fear. She was acutely aware of her uniqueness. Not only was she among the very few women undergoing the brutal training, but also one of the even fewer people of color in that environment. Surviving that program demanded a different breed of resilience physically, mentally, and emotionally. Yet, Tiana refused to let the stares, whispers, and open skepticism of her male counterparts unnerve her. She took every obstacle as a personal challenge, forging a reputation as a no-nonsense candidate who never quit. It was in the cold surf and relentless sand of Coronado Beach that Tiana found her true calling. She learned to expect the unexpected, adopt a mindset of total discipline, and treat the motto, "The only easy day was yesterday," as a way of life. In the face of adversity, her determination only grew. Over time, even the most hardened instructors learned to respect her stamina, level-headedness, and cunning approach to problem-solving. By the end of her training, Tiana not only earned the coveted trident, symbol of a Navy SEAL, but also became a legend in the making, a testament to perseverance for those who'd come after her. She rose through the ranks swiftly, her expertise ranging from close quarters combat to high-stakes intelligence operations. Whenever her commanding officers needed a calm, strategic mind to lead difficult missions, Tiana's name was on the shortlist. From time to time, she'd be deployed to the far corners of the world, carrying out operations shrouded in secrecy. Her credentials glistened with a dozen commendations, but she mostly kept a low profile, reluctant to attract too much attention. A life in the shadows was second nature to her, ensuring that even people in her hometown barely knew what she truly did for a living. It was a drizzly Wednesday afternoon when Tiana found herself back in Virginia on a rare break from active duty. She had come to finalize the sale of her late uncle's property, a modest house on the outskirts of town. Bureaucracy was not something she enjoyed, but the responsibilities of family had always been important to her. After hours of signing legal documents, Tiana was relieved to be done and decided to treat herself to a quiet cup of coffee in a familiar cafe near the waterfront. She slipped into a corner booth, hoping to go unnoticed as she unwound with a latte. Yet peace was short-lived. Outside the window, she spotted a commotion. A burly man in a uniform was raising his voice at an older black gentleman who was visibly distressed. Onlookers seemed hesitant to intervene. The uniformed man, Officer Bradley Marsh, a local police officer with a notorious short fuse, had the gentleman pressed against a brick wall. The man's groceries had spilled onto the sidewalk. Bags of fruits and a loaf of bread were scattered, some crushed underfoot. The older man seemed terrified, attempting to explain something Tiana couldn't quite hear through the glass. Tiana observed the scene with growing unease. She had a strict personal rule: do not draw attention unless absolutely necessary. But she couldn't just watch as some innocent person was manhandled by a cop who clearly believed he was above reproach. Marsh jabbed his baton at the man's torso, barking words Tiana could only guess were vile or at least humiliating. People nearby filmed on their phones, but none stepped forward. Finally, Tiana tossed a few bills on the table and stepped outside. Approaching calmly, she raised her voice just enough to be heard over the rain. "Officer, is everything all right here?" she asked, her tone respectful but firm. Marsh turned sharply, eyes narrowing at the sight of Tiana. She stood tall, her posture hinting at a quiet authority. The older man, still pinned to the wall, managed to twist his head enough to see her and silently plead for help. Marsh's lip curled with disdain as he sized her up. She was fit, with an athletic build, but he seemed to have no idea that beneath her civilian attire hid a warrior's discipline. His initial reaction was to brand her yet another meddling bystander, something he clearly detested. "Move along, lady. This is official police business," he snapped. His words dripped with condescension, as though he were speaking to a child who couldn't comprehend adult affairs. Tiana took a subtle breath, controlling the spark of anger threatening to flare within her. She was well aware of police protocol, having worked side by side with local law enforcement in various domestic operations. "I understand," she replied calmly, "but it looks like the gentleman needs medical attention." "Are you sure there's no misunderstanding?" Marsh's response was as swift as it was harsh. He released the older man, who nearly collapsed to the ground, and turned his focus entirely on Tiana. "Misunderstanding? You a lawyer or something?" The venom in his tone was unmistakable. "Maybe you should mind your own business before you become part of the problem." The older gentleman, catching his breath, took the opportunity to scurry away. Tiana glanced at him to ensure he was safe. Marsh interpreted her concern as a personal affront. He lunged forward, jabbing a finger in Tiana's face. "I said back off." Tiana's training kicked in. She didn't step back or cower. Instead, she gently pushed his hand aside to create a boundary, an act that only served to enrage him further. He barked into his radio for backup, describing her in disconcertingly aggressive terms: possible assailant, resisting police orders, refusing to disperse. Tiana's stomach churned. She knew how quickly a situation like this could escalate, especially when an officer weaponized his authority. But she remained composed. She'd navigated infinitely more volatile scenarios in her covert missions abroad. Within minutes, another squad car pulled up. Officer Ronald Gibbs and Officer Lisa Carter emerged, scanning the scene with a mixture of confusion and caution. Marsh yelled to them about how Tiana had interfered with an arrest and became aggressive. Tiana resisted the urge to roll her eyes. Marsh's twisted narrative was taking shape right there on the sidewalk, but Tiana couldn't risk a physical altercation. She carefully raised her hands, palms outward, showing she posed no threat. "I'm just trying to help," she said. "He was—" "Shut up," Marsh cut her off, spittle flying from his mouth. Gibbs shot Marsh a concerned look, as though silently questioning the older cop's judgment, but he didn't speak out. Carter hesitated, taking a small step toward Tiana as though she might actually listen to her side. But Marsh quickly barked at Carter to stand down. The tension was palpable. Bystanders filmed everything, murmuring among themselves. Some recognized Tiana from her teenage years. She had been the star athlete in the local high school track team, but no one seemed to know about her more recent, extraordinary life. Tiana realized that revealing her Navy SEAL status here and now might complicate matters further. She decided to remain silent about her occupation, wanting to diffuse the situation without resorting to pulling rank or overshadowing local police authority. But Marsh had other plans. With a theatrical flourish, he declared Tiana under arrest for obstruction of justice, cuffing her roughly. Carter and Gibbs exchanged glances again, but followed Marsh's lead. The surrounding onlookers gasped in dismay. Tiana winced slightly at the metal biting into her wrists, but she kept her composure, offering no resistance. After all, if there was one thing she knew, it was how to handle being in physically vulnerable positions. SEAL training had included countless hours in captivity simulations. She knew she could weather whatever came next. The ride to the station was tense and claustrophobic. Marsh insisted on driving, while Carter sat stiffly next to Tiana in the back seat. The drizzle outside turned into a downpour, and the sound of rain pelting the cruiser's roof filled the silence. Tiana felt the cold metal of the cuffs against her skin and the oppressive weight of injustice pressing down on her. She hoped that once they arrived at the station, someone in charge would see sense. Upon reaching the precinct, Tiana was escorted to a booking room where Marsh spat out his version of events to the duty sergeant. According to him, Tiana had violently interrupted a lawful detention and assaulted him by pushing him. Tiana's jaw clenched. Not only was he twisting the truth, but he was outright lying. Marsh rattled off charges with a kind of gusto that implied he'd done this sort of thing before. She was then led to a holding cell, a barren, grey space with a single bench. The door slammed behind her with a metallic echo. It had been years since Tiana felt quite so powerless. Even in the toughest combat missions, she'd always had her gear, her team, or at least the knowledge that her commanding officers knew where she was. Here, she was alone in a system that was predisposed to believe a white police officer over a black civilian, especially a black woman who had just been labeled aggressive. As time crawled by, Tiana replayed the incident in her head. She pictured the older gentleman's terrified face and Marsh's twisted rage. Part of her debated whether she should have identified herself as a high-ranking SEAL. The moment Marsh got physical, she knew that might have forced him to reconsider. Yet she also understood the complexities. Revealing classified details about her position wasn't just about protecting herself. Secrecy protected her and her fellow operators as well. The last thing she wanted was her face splashed over local or national news, connecting her to covert operations. An hour later, she was taken out for interrogation. In a narrow room illuminated by flickering fluorescent lights, Marsh and a departmental attorney questioned her. The attorney's tone was skeptical, but not outright hostile. She asked Tiana for her side of the story. Tiana explained that she saw Marsh using excessive force on a seemingly innocent man, stepped in to calm the situation, and never resisted his commands. She told them that Marsh escalated the situation without warning. Marsh, arms folded across his chest, eyed her with a self-satisfied smirk. He slipped in snide remarks, claiming Tiana was dangerous and had made threatening gestures. It was difficult for Tiana to hold her tongue, but she managed to remain respectful, letting her calm demeanor underscore the absurdity of Marsh's allegations. The departmental attorney scribbled notes on a yellow legal pad and asked Tiana to wait outside as she conferred with Marsh. Before Tiana was escorted out, Marsh leaned in, whispered something vile under his breath, something about knowing her place. The hairs on the back of Tiana's neck bristled, but she mentally repeated the discipline. Mantras she learned from her SEAL training: keep your cool, watch for the opening, operate with precision. While Tiana waited under guard near the interrogation room, a short, bespectacled man in a rumpled suit approached her. He introduced himself as Marcus Riley, a public defender assigned to her case. "I'm on your side," he said, his voice tinged with genuine concern. He apologized for the incompetent system that had landed her in this situation and promised to do everything possible to have the charges dropped quickly. Tiana studied him carefully. The lines on his face suggested a long history of battling in the trenches of the legal system. He seemed sincere, if overworked. "I appreciate it," she told him simply. She still had the option to call Navy JAG Judge, Advocate General, or a private attorney. But for now, she wanted to see how this situation played out. If it could be resolved quietly and fairly, all the better. She handed Marcus a card with the phone number of a contact at Naval Base Coronado, instructing him to reach out if things escalated. Moments later, the departmental attorney re-emerged, announcing that Tiana was to be formally booked for obstruction of justice and resisting arrest. This was a blow she had hoped the attorney, upon hearing her account, might dismiss the charges. Instead, it seemed Marsh's version prevailed, at least for the moment. Tiana could see the flicker of disappointment in Marcus's eyes. He immediately objected, stating that Tiana had not resisted in any physical manner. The attorney, giving a non-committal shrug, simply said it would be decided in court. So, Tiana was forced through the humiliating motions, fingerprinting, mugshots, and preliminary paperwork. The entire process felt surreal, like a bizarre dream where she was cast as the villain. As a SEAL, Tiana had faced life and death scenarios that would leave most people trembling, but this new battlefield, a fight for her civil liberty in a flawed justice system, felt unsettlingly personal. When she was finally released on bail later that evening, she stepped out into the damp parking lot, her mind already strategizing. She saw Marsh by one of the squad cars, leaning against the hood, arms crossed, shooting her a smug grin. She refused to give him any satisfaction. Instead, she calmly walked off, ignoring the drizzle that soaked her hair, reaffirming in her mind that she would handle this with every ounce of discipline she possessed. Marcus Riley caught up to her and handed over a date for her arraignment the following Monday morning at the Norfolk General District Court. "We'll sort this out, Miss West," he assured her. "There's footage from bystanders, and I'm confident we can gather enough evidence to show you did nothing wrong." Tiana thanked him, her voice clipped but polite. In the back of her mind, a plan was already forming. She wanted to locate that older gentleman Marsh had victimized. His testimony could be critical, but there was also a part of her that simply wanted to ensure the man was all right. She couldn't shake the image of him pinned to the wall under Marsh's brutality. In the days leading up to her arraignment, Tiana wasted no time. She hired a private investigator named Sharon Finch, a retired federal agent with a reputation for thoroughness. Sharon's job was to locate the older gentleman from the incident, find any additional witnesses, and gather the countless phone recordings that might exist on social media. Tiana also made discreet inquiries through her contacts at Naval Base Coronado, ensuring that if she needed character witnesses or service records, she would have them at her disposal. She spent her evenings at a modest motel just outside town, not wanting to burden her few local relatives with the stress of her sudden legal trouble. Every day, she woke up early, ran 5 miles to clear her head, then tackled the day's agenda: meetings with Marcus, updates from Sharon, visits to local shops to ask if anyone saw the altercation from a better vantage point. Bit by bit, the puzzle pieces started coming together. Sharon managed to track down the older man Franklin Hayes, a retired shipyard worker in his 70s who had a minor hearing impairment. Hayes, it turned out, was deeply shaken by the encounter, so much so that he had stayed indoors ever since, worried the police would come after him. When Sharon spoke with him, he recounted the event in clear, heartbreaking detail. Marsh had initially stopped him for acting suspiciously, an excuse Hayes recognized as racially motivated nonsense. When Hayes tried to explain he was just returning from the grocery store, Marsh escalated and pressed him against the wall, calling him slurs under his breath. Tiana arranged to meet Hayes in person, wanting to reassure him he wasn't alone. She found him in a small, cluttered living room, his cane propped against the sofa. He was soft-spoken and polite, offering Tiana tea the moment she walked in. She accepted, noticing the slight tremor in his hands. "Why would he do that to me?" Hayes asked, voice trembling with a mixture of fear and anger. "I served this country too, you know. In the army, years ago." Tiana listened quietly, empathizing with the man's bewilderment and pain. She expressed her gratitude that he was willing to share his story, explaining that his testimony could be pivotal in proving the truth. Meanwhile, the swirl of local gossip grew stronger with each passing day. The incident had been captured in multiple videos, some more complete than others. News stations picked up the story, framing it as a typical, she said scenario. But Tiana knew better. She had absolute confidence in the truth. She also knew that once Monday's court date arrived, her real challenge would be navigating a system predisposed to side with authority figures like Marsh. By the time Monday morning arrived, Tiana had her evidence meticulously organized. Marcus, though a busy public defender, was both relieved and impressed by her initiative. Together, they walked into the Norfolk General District Court. The old, imposing building had once inspired Tiana as a symbol of justice when she was a child on school field trips. Now it felt more like a crucible she had to endure. Inside, the buzz of lawyers, defendants, and clerks filled the corridors. Marsh was there, flanked by the departmental attorney and a cluster of uniformed officers who eyed Tiana with disdain. A murmur spread through the crowd. Many recognized Tiana from the local news coverage, but none truly grasped her background. She looked composed, wearing a simple black blazer, her hair neatly tied back. If she was nervous, she gave no sign. The hearing began promptly. A stern-faced judge presided, setting a matter-of-fact tone. Marsh testified first, recounting his fabricated story that Tiana had intervened in his attempt to question a potentially dangerous suspect, had pushed him, and refused to comply with lawful orders. He painted her as belligerent, physically confrontational, and claimed he'd feared for his safety. Tiana could feel the tension in the gallery as Marsh spoke. His practiced delivery suggested he had lied on the stand before and gotten away with it. Next came Tiana's turn. Marcus guided her through her version of events, ensuring she explained clearly how she had simply tried to defuse the situation. She pointed out that it was Marsh who initiated contact and that she never became aggressive. Video evidence supported her stance, although some clips were partial. Then Franklin Hayes took the stand. His testimony was heartfelt, describing how Tiana had calmly asked Marsh to stop hurting him and how she never used force, never threatened the officer. It was a powerful moment, one that caused a visible ripple in the courtroom. But the biggest surprise came when Marcus introduced a crucial piece of video footage from a bystander who had remained out of frame in most recordings. This footage showed Marsh's entire interaction with Hayes, as well as Tiana's attempt to intervene. It was the most damning evidence yet, capturing Marsh insulting Hayes and pushing Tiana, rather than the other way around. Gasps filled the courtroom. Marsh paled, his hand twitching at his side. Despite this revelation, the departmental attorney tried to undermine Tiana's credibility, hinting that Tiana might be hiding something about her background. There was a suggestion that maybe she had martial arts training or a possible criminal record. Marcus objected, but the seed was planted. Tiana felt her anger rising. She understood that the attorney was setting the stage for a smear, attempting to conjure the spectre of a dangerous black woman who must have done something to justify Marsh's actions. When the judge called for a recess, Tiana and Marcus headed out into the corridor. She pulled him aside, her gaze intense. "I think we need to disclose a piece of information," she said quietly. "I have a clearance. I can't reveal everything, but the court might benefit from knowing my profession." Marcus lifted his eyebrows in surprise. "You never told me exactly what you do," he admitted. "But if it can help your case, by all means, let's do it. We'll do it under oath so the court can't ignore it." They reconvened after the short recess. Marcus called Tiana back to the witness stand. She took a measured breath, glancing at Marsh, whose smugness had started to wane in the face of contradictory evidence. The departmental attorney seemed puzzled, but braced for whatever was coming. "Miss West," Marcus began, "can you please share with the court your current occupation and any relevant background that might demonstrate your character and training?" Tiana spoke clearly, projecting her voice so every word landed. "I am an active duty lieutenant commander in the United States Navy. I'm also a Navy SEAL, assigned to a specialized unit. I've been in the Navy for over a decade and completed Bud S training at Naval Base Coronado." A hush fell over the courtroom. Even the judge's typically impassive face registered surprise. Jaws dropped around the gallery. She continued, "As part of my training, I've been taught to remain calm in dangerous and high-pressure situations. I am trained in de-escalation tactics as well as combat. I have no criminal record, and I have dedicated my life to serving this country. At no point did I assault Officer Marsh, nor did I resist. I followed my training. I attempted to end a potential harm to a civilian in a non-violent manner." The judge leaned forward, clearly intrigued and somewhat taken aback. The reaction from the onlookers was more dramatic. Some whispered that Tiana didn't look like a Navy SEAL, a sentiment that made her bristle internally, though she had grown used to such remarks over the years. Others looked at Marsh with newfound skepticism, perhaps wondering if he realized how utterly foolish it was to lie about a woman who was trained to maintain calm under extremes. Marsh's face was a mosaic of conflicting emotions: astonishment, rage, and fear. He must have realized his entire narrative, built on the premise of Tiana being a volatile civilian, was crumbling before everyone's eyes. The departmental attorney scrambled to find a foothold, questioning whether Tiana might have used her specialized combat skills to subdue Marsh without it appearing on camera. The question was so ludicrous that even the judge seemed unimpressed, pointedly remarking that the video evidence showed Marsh as the aggressor. Still, Tiana didn't relish humiliating him. Part of her felt angry that someone like him was entrusted with public safety. He stood there, a scowl etched into his features, as though trying to will himself out of the corner he'd been backed into. The judge ordered both legal teams to submit briefs by the next morning, with the final ruling on whether the charges would proceed to trial to be announced within days. As Tiana left the courtroom, she saw Marsh slip out a side door, presumably trying to evade the media circus that was forming at the main entrance. Reporters swarmed Tiana, flinging questions about her military service, the altercation, and her reaction to Marsh's accusations. She kept her statements brief, deferring most details to Marcus, who managed to say that they had full confidence in the judicial process. Deep down, Tiana wondered if the system would truly do the right thing, or if Marsh had enough connections to muddy the waters. The next few days were a whirlwind of speculation and media attention. Local news outlets clamored for interviews with Tiana, some framing her as a modern-day hero, while others sensationalized the incident with headlines like "Local Cop versus Navy SEAL, Who's Telling the Truth?" Tiana was inundated with calls, messages, and emails, some supportive, others hateful. The scrutiny weighed heavily on her. She knew her chain of command would expect a detailed explanation as well, so she prepared a thorough report outlining the facts. Meanwhile, Marsh's superiors at the police department launched an internal investigation, pressured by the growing public outcry. Officer Lisa Carter, the younger cop who had arrived on the scene that day, was called in to give her statement. According to inside sources, people that Sharon Finch had cultivated as informants, Carter's account corroborated much of Tiana's story, describing Marsh as the primary aggressor. Officer Gibbs was also interviewed and admitted he was uncertain about what exactly happened, but noted that Marsh had seemed unusually agitated. The tension reached a boiling point when Marsh held his own press conference outside the station, flanked by a few members of the police union. He claimed that he feared for his life upon encountering Tiana, citing her unknown combat skills and saying the body cam footage was inconclusive. To Tiana's dismay, he doubled down on his lies, painting himself as a victim of a system that had turned against law enforcement. But Tiana wasn't without allies. The local NAACP chapter condemned Marsh's actions, citing the bystander videos and Tiana's impeccable service record. Several veterans groups voiced their support for Tiana, praising her bravery both on and off the battlefield. The final piece of the puzzle arrived when Tiana's commanding officer at Naval Base Coronado released a public statement of solidarity, emphasizing Tiana's outstanding record and personal integrity. That statement carried significant weight. It wasn't every day that a commanding officer publicly defended one of their own in a civilian legal matter. As the scheduled day for the judge's decision approached, Tiana found herself oscillating between hope and fear. She believed she had a strong case, but she was all too aware of how unpredictable court rulings could be, especially in cases where systemic biases came into play. On the morning of the hearing, Tiana dressed in her official Navy uniform, an option she didn't initially plan on, but one Marcus encouraged. "It'll remind the court that you are, indeed, who you say you are," he reasoned. At the courthouse, the atmosphere was electric. Protesters lined the steps, some holding signs demanding justice for Tiana, others proclaiming their unwavering support for the police. News vans surrounded the area, cameras capturing every angle. Inside, Tiana sat quietly next to Marcus, ignoring the swirl of chatter, her posture as steady as if she were awaiting a mission briefing. The judge, the Honorable Carolyn Davenport, was known for her no-nonsense demeanor. She entered the courtroom and immediately called for order. She read from a prepared statement, carefully articulating her words so no one could misinterpret. After reviewing the sworn testimony, video evidence, and relevant legal arguments, I find that the evidence overwhelmingly suggests that the charges brought against Miss Tiana West were based on false premises, she declared. The court hereby dismisses all charges against Miss West. Furthermore, this court recognizes there is sufficient cause to investigate Officer Bradley Marsh's actions and statements for potential perjury and misconduct. A tidal wave of reactions swept through the courtroom. Reporters broke rank to rush out and break the news. Tiana exhaled slowly, relief coursing through her. Marsh, who was seated on the opposite side, looked as though he might explode from anger or fear. The departmental attorney stiffened, her posture betraying that she had not anticipated such a decisive statement from the judge. Marcus gently patted Tiana on the shoulder, whispering, "Congratulations, Lieutenant Commander." She nodded, her gratitude to him immense. But it wasn't just about her. Franklin Hayes, seated a few rows behind, gave a small smile, as if to say, "Finally, some justice." Tiana made a mental note to personally thank him and every other person who stood by her. As the gavel banged, the judge rose and left, not wanting to linger in the media frenzy that was about to unfold. Tiana followed Marcus toward the door. Cameras flashed in her face, microphones shoved forward, a cacophony of voices shouting questions. She paused briefly, stating, "I'm thankful the court saw the truth. I trust the justice system to hold any misconduct accountable." While the dismissal of charges was a victory, Tiana knew the battle wasn't entirely over. An internal affairs probe would follow. Marsh, in a moment of panic, might attempt damage control or lash out further. As Tiana stepped into the corridor, she caught a glimpse of him slinking away, his face contorted with a mixture of humiliation and rage. He did not approach her, but his glare spoke volumes. He was a cornered animal, capable of anything. In the days that followed, a full-scale internal affairs IA investigation was launched into Marsh's actions. Witness statements, body cam footage, and official reports were scrutinized. The local chief of police, under pressure from city officials and public opinion, placed Marsh on administrative leave pending the investigation's outcome. Marsh's friends in the department closed ranks around him, claiming he was being railroaded, while others distanced themselves, privately admitting that Marsh had a long history of complaints from civilians, most of which never amounted to formal action. Tiana tried to return to some semblance of normalcy. She was anxious to wrap up her uncle's estate matters and fly back to her duty station, but each passing day brought new revelations and demands. She received calls from other victims, mostly people of color, who claimed Marsh had harassed them as well. While she felt a moral obligation to listen and help, the weight of it all was overwhelming. She wasn't a lawyer or an activist, yet her name had become synonymous with exposing police misconduct in the area. Meanwhile, her chain of command at Naval Base Coronado advised her to stay until everything was resolved. They supported her, but wanted to ensure no further surprises compromised her record or her ability to serve. Tiana understood their caution. The Navy prized discipline and a clean reputation for its SEALs. This entire fiasco could have been a career ender if the court had ruled differently. Sharon Finch, the private investigator, uncovered more damning information. Marsh had a pattern of filing charges against individuals who questioned his conduct. He'd lost a lawsuit a few years back for wrongful detention, settled out of court. While some in the department defended him as a tough but fair cop, the consistent theme was his hostility toward people of color, particularly those who stood up to him. As the IA investigation reached its final stage, the prosecutor's office announced that Marsh would face perjury charges for lying under oath. This was a rare move, sending shockwaves through the police community. Marsh, apparently in a desperate bid to avoid the consequences, tried to strike a deal with the prosecutor. Part of the alleged bargain involved him resigning from the force and providing information on other potential misconduct in the department. The details were unclear, but it signaled that Marsh was trying to save himself at any cost. Tiana watched from the sidelines, torn between a sense of vindication and a profound sorrow that the system allowed someone like Marsh to continue for so long. She wondered about all the unknown victims who never got a day in court, who might have pleaded guilty to lesser charges simply out of fear or financial constraints. The entire ordeal rekindled her commitment to fairness and protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Being a SEAL wasn't just about fighting wars overseas. It also meant upholding the values of integrity and justice at home. 2 weeks later, Tiana's phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. On the other end was a trembling voice, Officer Lisa Carter. She asked if Tiana could meet her at a nearby diner. Concerned, Tiana agreed. She found Carter in a corner booth, wearing civilian clothes, her eyes darting nervously around as if she expected someone to leap out at her. "I don't have much time," Carter began, leaning in. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry I froze that day. I know I should have intervened, or at least spoken up sooner." She stared at the table, her guilt evident. "I've been questioned by internal affairs. I told them everything, how Marsh acted and how you never raised a hand against him." Tiana placed a reassuring hand on Carter's wrist. "You did the right thing by telling the truth eventually. The culture in a police department can be complicated." "I understand." She meant it. She had seen enough hierarchical organizations to know how easily fear of retaliation could silence even well-intentioned people. Carter fidgeted with a paper napkin. I joined the force to help my community. But after seeing Marsh get away with intimidation for so long, I started to think maybe this was just how things worked. Her voice cracked. I'm not proud of that. But seeing you in court, standing your ground, that made me realize I can't just stand by and let bad cops ruin everything. Tiana nodded, empathy filling her eyes. Thank you for telling me. I know it couldn't have been easy. She offered a small smile, one soldier to another, though they wore different uniforms. Stay strong. You have the power to create the kind of policing your community deserves. Maybe this will mark a turning point. They parted ways on amicable terms. Tiana sensed Carter was determined to be part of a reform effort, and Tiana hoped this was more than a fleeting moment of remorse, that something genuinely transformative would follow in the department. Days later, the perjury hearing against Marsh commenced. This time, Tiana was not the defendant, but a key witness for the prosecution. The atmosphere in the courthouse was tense yet again, though the spotlight had shifted squarely to Marsh's alleged misconduct. The prosecutor called Tiana to the stand, asking her to recount the events under oath once more, focusing on the discrepancies between her account, the video evidence, and Marsh's sworn statements. Marsh's defense attorney attempted to discredit Tiana, raising questions about the secrecy of her missions, the potential for classified details to obscure the full truth. The judge dismissed the line of questioning as irrelevant. The defense also tried to suggest that Tiana's SEAL training meant she could have used subtle force, that the cameras didn't catch an argument that sounded increasingly desperate in light of the footage that showed Marsh pushing and berating her. One pivotal moment came when Officer Lisa Carter testified. She admitted she had initially hesitated to contradict Marsh's statements, but eventually told the truth in her internal affairs interview. She confirmed that Marsh had escalated the situation unprovoked, and Tiana had not acted aggressively. The prosecution presented internal memos from the police department, showing that Marsh had been warned about his conduct several times in the past. With the evidence piling up, Marsh's defense lawyer advised him to consider a plea bargain. Marsh, however, was stubbornly holding on to his narrative. Toward the end of the hearing, in an explosive twist, a newly surfaced body cam recording from Officer Gibbs, apparently forgotten at first, was introduced. The audio, though partially muffled, captured Marsh making threats, including the phrase, "I'll make sure she regrets crossing me." This was the final blow, dispelling any remaining doubt about Marsh's intentions. As the proceedings drew to a close, the judge indicated there was more than enough to move forward with a trial. Marsh's face was ashen, his bravado drained. In the hallway afterward, he lashed out at reporters, yelling that he was being framed. His police union representatives did their best to shield him from the barrage of questions. But the writing was on the wall. Marsh's career was effectively over, and he faced a likely conviction for perjury and potentially other charges stemming from the investigation. For Tiana, witnessing Marsh's downfall was both gratifying and sobering. She was relieved that justice seemed within reach, but also cognizant of how close she had come to a vastly different outcome. If the videos hadn't surfaced, or if she had been less composed under scrutiny, she might have been the one facing a ruinous verdict. As she stepped out of the courthouse, she paused to take in the bright sunlight, feeling the warmth on her face as an affirmation that she was, for the moment, free of the dark cloud that had loomed over her. Life after the legal battles felt like a slow return to normalcy. Tiana wrapped up her uncle's estate affairs and prepared for her flight back to Naval Base Coronado. Before leaving, she made time to visit Franklin Hayes. Over tea, they shared a moment of mutual respect and relief. "You did more for me than I ever could have done for you," Hayes said, smiling gently as he patted her hand. Tiana insisted it wasn't true. Without his courage to testify, the case might have spiraled into a never-ending saga of "he said, she said." She also quietly arranged for local veterans organizations to check in on Hayes regularly, ensuring he had the support he needed. Though she never sought accolades, Tiana knew part of being a SEAL, being a protector, meant carrying on even after the cameras turned elsewhere. The day before her departure, Tiana visited Marcus Riley at his modest office. She handed him a small token of appreciation, a polished wooden plaque engraved with the Navy SEAL motto, "The only easy day was yesterday." "It's a reminder," she said, "that you fought for me when I needed it." Marcus smiled, clearly touched. "Thank you for your service, Tiana, and for reminding me why I do what I do." That same afternoon, Tiana stood on the shoreline near her childhood home. The ocean breeze rustled her hair as she gazed at the water, recalling her very first dream of joining the Navy. So much had happened since then, trials by fire, literal and figurative. She thought about the men and women she served with, risking their lives daily in secret operations far from home. And yet, the battle for justice on American streets could be as fraught as any battlefield overseas. Her phone chimed a call from her commanding officer. "Lieutenant Commander West," came the familiar voice. "We're looking forward to your return." "You've had quite an adventure there," Tiana smiled. "Yes, sir. I'll be on base tomorrow." She hung up, feeling a surge of pride and relief. Her Navy family was ready to welcome her back, no questions asked, trusting in her integrity. She watched the sun begin its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. In a few hours, she'd be on a flight, leaving this chapter behind. But she couldn't help reflecting on what she would take with her: a deeper appreciation for justice, the support of a few good allies, and the knowledge that sometimes the hardest fights are the ones we never see coming. Months later, news broke that Bradley Marsh had entered a guilty plea for perjury and was sentenced to time in a federal correctional facility. The local press reported that he lost his pension and faced multiple lawsuits from individuals he had wronged during his tenure. In a final, ironic twist of karmic justice, Marsh found himself in a prison environment that mirrored the very intimidation and harassment he once wielded so casually against others. For Tiana, the closure was bittersweet. She neither reveled in his downfall nor pitied his fate. She saw it as a necessary consequence of his actions, a reminder that accountability should spare no one in uniform. Tiana continued her distinguished career. Word of her ordeal had circulated quietly among her fellow SEALs, and though many were shocked by her story, they expressed unwavering solidarity. She remained a private figure, focusing on missions that took her to remote regions around the world, always guided by the principle that true service requires both courage and compassion. She thrived in her element, a testament to how adversity could forge an even sharper edge in those who refused to break. Meanwhile, in Virginia, changes slowly took root. The local police department announced reforms, including mandatory body cameras for all officers, enhanced bias training, and the creation of a civilian oversight board. Some scoffed at these measures as mere window dressing, but others, like Officer Lisa Carter, saw them as a step toward dismantling a culture of silence. Civil rights organizations and community leaders pushed for more lasting transformations, motivated by Tiana's example and the outcry her case had inspired. Franklin Hayes, newly active in local veteran support circles, often spoke of Tiana as the bravest woman I've ever met. He shared his story in public forums, encouraging people not to surrender to cynicism or despair. He might have limped a bit when he walked, leaning on his cane for support, but his voice was steadier than ever, believing that justice, once awakened, had a chance to grow stronger. In quiet moments, Tiana sometimes revisited the memory of that rainy day outside the cafe, when everything had begun. Had she done the right thing by stepping in? The answer echoed in every person who thanked her for shining a light on abuses, in every letter from young women of color who had found in her a role model to emulate. Yes, she had done what she was trained to do, protect and serve with steadfast honor. She realized that wearing the uniform of a Navy SEAL wasn't just about strength and skill, it was about embodying the core values of courage, justice, and respect for all. And so her story became a quiet legend, retold in hushed tones among those who needed a reminder that even against the most daunting odds, truth could prevail. In the end, Tiana West carried on with her life, content in the knowledge that she had upheld her oath not only on battlefields abroad, but also on the streets of her own hometown. Perhaps that was the greatest victory of all. In a world overshadowed by secrets and lies, Tiana West's extraordinary journey showcases the unyielding power of integrity. She demonstrates how honesty can prevail, even when the scales of justice seem severely imbalanced. Her struggle reveals that true heroes walk quietly among us, whether in uniform or in everyday life, protecting the vulnerable and guarding the ideals we hold dear. Meanwhile, Officer Marsh's downfall reminds us that no one is above the law, and deceit inevitably unravels in the face of undeniable truth. Tiana's steadfast commitment to safeguarding those who cannot defend themselves stands as a beacon of hope for all who value justice. If this moving account of determination and heroism has resonated with you, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to our channel. Your support empowers us to continue bringing to light the compelling stories that inspire us to uphold integrity in every corner of our lives. Thank you for watching, and stay bold.